Hello everybody, it's a lovely autumn vibe here today. The sun is shining, the leaves are falling from the trees a bit early, and the rustle of leaves rolling around in the wind, it has that nice kind of autumnal vibe that just about everybody loves, in fact. So the summer's over and the autumn is here now, fall as Americans call it, and this is always a time of introspection. It's one of those when you first have the first proper signs of autumn. It's a sign of contemplation. It's a time of looking inside and thinking about things. The other part of the year that's like this is the immediate period just after Christmas Day, between Christmas Day and New Year's Eve. If you're not working frantically, you have these kind of emotions, that you sort of like, there's a lot of melancholia, kind of a longing for an idealistic fragments of the past and this kind of thing. And I think it's because of the change in light and the change of the Earth's position around the sun, coupled with, the sense of the coming darkness. And I got thinking about the Rona thing and the second wave. Now, we do have a precedent here for this that was set in the past. When I was growing up as a little kid, underneath my parents' sink in Ballymun was a booklet called, it wasn't called Protect and Survive, that was the English one, but it was the Irish one, very similar, produced by the Civil Defence in Ireland, and what to do in the case of a nuclear war. Now, people who are young today won't remember that. From the late 1940s all the way up until the very early 1990s, the world, and the West in particular, lived in absolute terror of nuclear annihilation. It was a given that it was probably going to happen, who's going to drop the bomb kind of thing, and when is it going to happen? There was mutually, and we were raised on that whole thing. They were raised on the thing of mutually assured destruction, that both countries, the United States and Russia, Soviet Union, would both destroy one another as soon as the first missile was launched. And they had far more nukes than they ever heard. And films like The Day After Tomorrow would be on and things like that, and Survivors on the BBC, and the movie The Wave with Richard Chamberlain. Now, this all began with the Cold War when it first began, and it was two major incidents that led to this mentality. The first one was that in the 1940s, the Soviet Union detonated a colossal hydrogen bomb successfully. And this was followed by, a while later, the Sputnik. And Americans could go out, and Europeans could go out, and see the Russian satellite flying overhead. And it was only a matter of time before they worried about this thing raining down hydrogen bombs upon Europe and Western Europe and North America. And, we were always told that the Russian tanks were just at the Iron Curtain, and the East German army were more than ready to take on the West, because it was the real army of Germany. That's actually true. The East German Wehrmacht were the inheritors of the German army, of the real German army from Prussian times. They saw the West German army as just basically a division of the US military, and morale was very high among the East German army, which is very true, and they were more than ready. They would have taken over West Germany no problem, because the West German army were seen as like amateurs compared to the East German army, and that's absolutely true. And so they were raised to this like formidable military force, just a few days away, but they would start with nukes being dropped, and we were raised with all that, we were raised with this terror. And that awful movie When the Wind Blows, cartoon film, it's one of the most depressing things you'll ever see, with David Bowie doing a soundtrack at the end, and songs like Two Tribes by Frankie Goes to Hollywood. We were totally saturated in this, and to the point where it was a given when I was a teenager that we were going to be nuked. It was just a given. It just was going to happen at some point. And it didn't happen. And magic intervened, and the Soviet Union, Soviet bloc fell, and it never happened. The reason why they had more nukes than they needed was not because they were insane as such, but it's very difficult to set off a nuclear explosion. So it was assumed, it was given that many of those missiles would fail. They only needed some of them to work, but they didn't tell us that. They didn't tell us this at the time, and so you were always told about the nuclear war was bad enough, but wait till the radiation comes in. You'll be longing for the nuclear blast when it happened downtown, and you were out in the suburbs and you survived it, but your house is blown up. You'll be wishing it was that again, because the radiation is coming, and the radiation will come and eat your body alive and give you cancer and make your hair and your teeth fall out and all this stuff. And sure enough, that's the second wave of corona. That's exactly how they're selling the second wave. Even that despicable creature, Bill Gates, licking his lips and smirking. If they don't get it the first time, they'll get it the second time. That thing. And he knows it's all bullshit and it's all fear. And I was just thinking about, that's what the second wave is. The second wave is the fallout from the nukes. They're selling you see, they recycle. That's because they're psychopaths. They're not very clever. They're not very intelligent. So they're devious, but they're not. They make mistakes because they're impulsive, and they rush into things, and the second wave thing that they're selling is the second wave, second wave, second wave, second wave. That's the new version of nuclear fallout. And they have a generation traumatized in the same way. That, the second wave is going to be much worse. Oh, you wish it was like the lockdown back in April. Oh, the second wave, this kind of thing, right? Oh, we're trying to avoid a second wave. Ooh. And this puts them in a godlike position because, I am your civil servant, bureaucratic god, okay? And I'm in a position to decide whether or not there's going to be a second lockdown. Worship me, adore me, live in terror of my wrath. I have the power to shut your business down. I have the power to stop your children from going to schools. I have the power to stop you from visiting your boyfriend in another country. I have the power to stop you from ever going to a sports event or a holiday ever again. And that's what they're like. And that's that, and so we have to appease them. So they're Jehovah type characters. And they're like, I'm Jehovah and I have my wrath. And you must sacrifice whatever I tell you to sacrifice, your own children. You must all be Abraham, and you must do this. You must put a muzzle on your child. This is the Abrahamic thing again. Abraham gets Isaac, and there was a whole series of points where before the knife was plunged into Isaac, it wasn't plunging, but nearly plunged into Isaac, that all along that way, Abraham had been gaslighted at that point, and he could have just said, no. And so, but he waits until he's definitely on his way in a Milgram type experiment way of killing his own son for this demon Jehovah in the Middle East. And Abraham is the father of all the three, what they call Judeo-Christian Islamo religions. And that's why you've been trialed so easily. And you have all your health ministers in your country, and they're all being like Jehovah. They're saying, put the mask on your child. Show your devotion to me. Next one. Put your child in a box so he can go back to school. Show your devotion to me. Next one. Inject your child with the vaccine. And the vaccine is to the COVIDiots what the dagger was to Abraham. They will shove it in if they're told. And that's why I said it'll never be mandatory. The idiots will be lining up for it. They want to. Just like the contact tracing app or the app, the travel passport app that the Irish government is bringing in. Not mandatory. Not at all. It doesn't really mean anything ultimately other than you're being obedient. And your Jehovah Kavoda 19, Jehovah 19 has you serving him. And I think there's a lot to be said with the Gnostics and the And the Cathars believed that the God of the Old Testament was an evil demon pretending to be God. In fact, it's actually, if you start looking into the esoteric history of it, that's exactly what it is. And Jesus Christ came not to free us from original sin, but to actually tell us that this thing is a demon and don't be worshipping it. And that's why he was crucified. He wasn't sacrificed for his father. He was torn to bits by a demon, working through the synagogue in Rome, in Jerusalem, with the blessing of the Romans. Now, what the legal statutes of the Romans, he broke the law, there's, even if that's only a metaphor, it's a bloody good one. It's a bloody good metaphor, and. It's almost like the inverse of Abraham. It's almost like the Cathars and the Gnostics and the Neoplatonists and the Bogomils. These were all the heretical sects. They all kind of figured out that Jesus' death was the correction of what happened with Abraham in reverse. But that's why they killed. We were never out. They all hid that from us. And, I'm not a Christian, but if I was tending to be a Christian, I'd probably be almost like a Catholic Christian or a Gnostic, more than I would be a typical, Roman Christian, whatever, and its descendants that come from that. But, and so it's like you're tested, put the mask, it's an incremental, piecemeal gaslighting routine designed to, really mess you up, really, really screw with you, and you go along with it, and so they definitely have made the second wave of COVID-19. They've definitely made that into the new version of the fallout from the nuclear weapons. The nukes was the lockdown in March and the initial pandemic that they claim happened, and the fallout is. And that's why the people who grew up like Gates, who knew probably as a child it was never going to happen, licking his lips because he knows it gives him the power over others. It gives politicians the power over others. And, wow, you just have to really, knowledge. It's true that knowledge is power. And you cannot trust governments. You just can't. Anyone who does is a fool. Gore Vidal said that the duty of a patriot is to be very rude to his government. And, in the old days, journalists, were, you won't have things like the Watergate scandal ever being broken again, because journalists are coming right out of university now, and they're infatuated with politicians, infatuated with central government, infatuated with bureaucracy, and they will. There's the only critical journalism are the alternative media, guys like us, and we don't, we do reach large audiences. I have to say, if you look at the amount of people, the amount of hits the average mainstream media site gets, it's not really they don't have the monopoly anymore. Those days are gone, and. But they still think that they have the greatest power because enough of the population still thinks that what's on mainstream media is the absolute unbridled truth. And it's not. It's not. It never was. It's propaganda. But at least there was once a time where journalists and, investigative reporters acted as a buffer in the mainstream against that. But that doesn't exist now. It's fellas like us and women like us and men, families, and who can think for themselves and who see through all this stuff, and that we're being incrementally gaslighted. And this is the beauty of not having any dogmatic fixation to anything. I'm not even patriotic. I love Ireland, the land, and I love the people and the culture. But I don't fight for Ireland, the political entity. I see no difference between people in Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. We're all Irish. We're all, of the goddess era. And or anyone who wants to come here from another country and embrace that culture, I welcome them, regardless of their heritage or skin colour. And the problem will always be religion. That's what really scares the shit out of me. In particular, one religion that's taking over, and that has, that's another, you think of Abraham's blade dagger. The dagger had two sides. One side is Christianity, and that's now blunt, and now they're going to plunge in the other side is still sharp, which is Islam. After 1,500 years, when we finally put a wall up of some kind to the Christians, to the Christian control of our country, now we have another one coming in. That's what I'm always saying. If you want to stay Christian or Catholic, become a folk Catholic or a folk Christian. Don't get involved with churches and things like that. I mean, the monumental act of betrayal they're not betrayal because they never were on our side. They never were on our side, the Catholic bishops. They never were. They loved the famine because it meant they could set up new dioceses in America and everywhere else, Canada and Australia. They were loving it. It was a way of getting, when you had the nativists in America who were saying the Irish immigration is just a plot by the Catholic Church, the Vatican, to make America Catholic, they were telling the truth. It wasn't the fault of the poor Irish immigrants who were starving and going to America. It was the fault of the Irish bishops taking orders directly from the Pope, encouraging people in Ireland to go to America rather than stay home and fight. And they've never been on our sides, ever. Not from the moment of St. Patrick's magical fire, when he burned tar to the ground. That's what really happened. If he existed or whatever he was, whatever Roman army he's an allegory to represent, to Croke Park and the Eid Festival. They've never been on our side. I don't know how anyone could even think they were. I don't know how any patriotic person can be devoted to the Catholic Church or the Christian Church. When you had the penal laws, the only group the penal laws that were exempt from the penal laws were Church of Ireland Anglican Protestants. Irish Presbyterians and Catholics were turned into second-class citizens. No one ever talks about the Presbyterians and that, but they were. During the famine, the bishops ate, and even the most Catholic priests, they ate and lived in luxury. And and I'm sure there's lots of decent men who were Catholic priests who did go out there. We don't hear about them, but the bishops didn't. The bishops didn't. The same with the War of Independence. If you were caught fighting the British, you had the priest going down. You had the priest taking confessions for 200 years off rebels. And then would go straight down to the British garrison and tell the officer what they're planning for their next attack. And then these same fellas with their rosary beads going into battle, talking about, oh, my blessed Catholic Ireland, and the priest had just betrayed him. Not his fault. He was a brave man or woman, but he didn't know. And during the War of Independence, they were excommunicated. If you were a rebel fighting the British, you were excommunicated on the spot. And it went right on to the 1960s. Until so it's like, it's just unbelievable, and people are devoted to these creatures, and so your answer to, so they use the same templates over and over again. And the Catholic Church is just like what I said with the wave and the fallout. Well, they're just like how they were back in the time of the famine in Ireland. They betrayed the people during the famine. They just saw us as a commodity to export to America as human trafficking, to build up their archdiocese in New York and everywhere else. And the nativists were true, but it wasn't the fault of the immigrants. The American nativists were absolutely true. What they were saying, it was a plot by the papists, by the Pope, to flood America full of Catholics. That's exactly what the famine was. There was absolutely no doubt about it. The Irish people should have had the sense to turn around and said, the nativists are right. But they didn't have they were a different time. It's easy to pass judgment now, but these people were desperate for anything to try and survive. But that's exactly it. They were sacrificed. And you see films like Gangs of New York and the Irish immigrants getting off the boat in New York and having rocks thrown at them. It was much worse than that. This is where the whole Black Lives Matter thing is bullshit. I think in Kansas City, the KKK, burned alive something like 38 Irish immigrants in an attack one night. Catholics, because they didn't want Catholics moving into Kansas. I mean, this is awful history. And the Irish have kind of, moved on and gone on from it. But, Irish Americans, have, as successful as they are, do not want to confront that they were not wanted in America when they first came, and they should be very aware of that. And it was, you can say, okay, it was the Yankee Blue Bloods. But it wasn't really. They weren't really after the people. I mean, if you look at H.P. Lovecraft's thing about when he talks about the Irish, he's really talking about the Catholic Church using the Irish in a lot of ways, and the same with the other immigrants like Portuguese that he didn't like either, and Italians. And he was really going on about how it was a scam by the church, to